So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This is our fourth virtual session so far, and it's one of the ones I've really been looking forward to. So absolutely delighted to have Dave Smithson, who is Operations Director at Anxiety UK. Dave, can you go with that? Dave is going to talk us through managing anxiety during COVID-19. There's a few little things on housekeeping that I'll just touch on quickly, but then I'll stop speaking, and then Dave can take over for the stuff that you're here for, really. So first and foremost, so this is recording, and we will be using the recording afterwards for our website and social media and things like that. If you would prefer not to be part of the recording, that's absolutely fine. That's no problem at all. Just send me a message or hit reply on the email you will have got for the registration details for this session, and all we'll do is we'll make sure that you're sort of blurred out. But one thing that would help with that is if you put yourself off the camera and muted yourself. It's not required, but it would help a little bit. But, so yeah. And other than that, it's just to say that this is very much please do think of this as a safe space, a safe area. If you've got questions, do please let us know. And it's something that these virtual meetings we've found that they're very helpful in getting people really connected and together, especially at this time. So do please enjoy the time that we have together. So with that then, I'll hand over to Dave now to introduce himself and to start the session.
Great. Well, thanks, Luke, and thank you for inviting me. I'm a bit worried now that you say it's the one you've been looking forward to the most, and feel like a bit extra pressure there. But thanks. Hopefully, the next sort of 45-50 minutes, however long it takes for us to go over it, will be helpful to you, give you some insight into the kind of things that you can think about and do to self-help, to self-manage your anxiety, if at all possible, because obviously there are lots of techniques and little tips that we can share with you to help you manage it. And what I'm going to do is ask Luke, can he let me share my screen so I can pop the slides up?
Yeah, that should be fine. If you just press share screen, it should work, hopefully.
It says host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh,
sorry.
Be helpful. No. Let's see. Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. That's my fault. Let's see. Hopefully that works now. If you click off and back on.
I will try and keep an eye on the chat. If anybody does want to ask a question, I will try and stop and ask for questions in various places. But if you do want to ask something, if you pop something in the chat box, and I'll try and keep an eye on it. And if I miss it, Luke, if you could.
Yeah, no problem.
Give me a shout. Okay, so we are screen sharing now.
There we go.
Yeah.
Let me just close that up a little bit, and then. Okay, it might be better if I don't do present view, but no, never mind. So here we are. So manage anxiety during COVID-19. I'm Dave Smithson. I'm the Operations Director at Anxiety Care, and I've been there for about 7.5 years now. So I've been with the charity quite a number of times, a number of years. So who are we? Well, Anxiety UK is the UK's leading user-led anxiety charity. We were founded in 1970, and as you can probably tell from the special logo in the top right there, it's our 50th anniversary this year. In fact, last Friday we were due to have a celebration event, which, needless to say, has been cancelled, and that doesn't look like we're going to be celebrating it in the traditional fashion this year after all. But we've been around a long time, and obviously give a lot of people help, support, information, advice on a whole range of anxiety disorders, stress and anxiety-based depression. And obviously, during that time, in that time, we've built up quite a strong following. Let me just move this out of the way so it's not going to bug me. So, quick summary of our services. I'm not going to run through every single tab of here, but it just gives you an idea of the kind of number of interactions that we have with people. It's worth pointing out that our national helpline, it says there are 20,000 annual support interactions through the helpline, live chat, etc. Annually, but that's our non-pandemic data. We've been measuring and monitoring our contacts over the last 2 months since we went into the lockdown phase, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, and we've had huge increases in numbers of people contacting us, so it's a lot higher than that at the moment. But lots of people do interact with us and access services with us, etc. Our main service support then is we have an accredited therapy service, so you can access therapy through Anxiety UK, either cognitive behavioural therapy, which is the common standard for NHS improving access to psychological therapies, IAPT programme. We also offer counselling, compassion focused therapy and clinical hypnotherapy. So we have 4 different types of therapy, and the compassion focused therapy is fairly new. We only launched it last week. And that can be delivered either as a separate approach, or it can be blended with other types of therapy. We also have, as I've already mentioned, have a national helpline. We're a membership-led organisation. We have a large social media presence, and we have our own research fund. So we do invest in finding out more. Moving into let's talk a bit more specifically. I'll give you a bit of data about what we've been doing very briefly over the last couple of months. So we've seen 3 quite distinct phases in the run-up to COVID-19. We had our pre-lockdown phase where we saw a lot of people contacting us worried about health anxiety, which is quite natural, and worried about OCD, people who maybe previously lived with OCD, maybe got it under control, and we're now being, as you may recall, and still being told to constantly wash our hands and wash for 20 seconds and all those things, singing happy birthday or whatever it was that they told us to do 2 months ago. And there was a lot of presentations, a lot of people worried about restarting their OCD fears, etc. Then obviously we moved into the lockdown phase in the middle towards the end of March, wasn't it, 23rd of March. And we saw a change of emphasis then on people contacting us who were then more worried about the isolation, the impact that was having on their mental health, particularly those that were already engaged in services to support their anxiety. So they were maybe having weekly therapy sessions, or in some cases they might be having support from a community mental health team. And all of a sudden those support mechanisms that were in place for them were taken away. And even just some simple things such as meeting family members out normally. I mean, going out and meeting and engaging and contacting and connecting with other people is a good way of looking after yourself, and that network, that peer support, whatever it was that was around people that was there to support them, was suddenly taken away from them. So that was a lot of problems in the lockdown, and we're still experiencing some of that. There's also fear about the actual virus itself as well at that time. If they did know it, would they contact it, and etc. And then we're now starting to move towards, and we're starting to see already, obviously some of the restrictions are being general. Talk about schools returning next week and shops reopening in a couple of weeks' time. So we're moving into what we call in our adjustment phase, and we're planning and preparing for people who are going to have anxiety about going back to normal. We did a survey of our members a couple of weeks ago, and 67% of them said the thought of the restrictions being lifted created them increased anxiety. And of that, 57% were saying that it's the fear of contracting the virus if they have to go back out. Then there was the fear of going shopping, the fear of public transport, open places, going back to work, education. And indeed, 54% were saying that they'd got so comfortable at home and they felt safe at home now that the thought of going back out into the pre-pandemic routine and getting back into that old routine wasn't something that they found particularly attractive. They were quite happy. So we've got a mixed bag of things going on here. We've got people who have had to struggle and coping with the loneliness and the isolation, whereas other people have found that being helpful to them. It's slowed down their pace of life. They've reconnected with nature. And I don't know if any of you live in rural areas or you watch Spring Watch. You saw Spring Watch last night. Chris Packham was talking about how the reconnecting with nature has helped people's mental well-being over these past couple of months. So for some people it's been a positive, some people it's been a negative. And coping with isolation and loneliness is really difficult when you're managing any kind of anxiety or other kind of mental health well-being condition. So trying to stay connected is really difficult in this situation. Obviously, we've got wonderful technology that we're using now, which we can draw upon, and try and stay connected with family and friends in other ways. Be more creative. That's a good way of doing it. And engaging in support groups like this one is a good way of keeping involved in not staying isolated and trying to help manage that loneliness. So our response, we've obviously seen a substantial increase in demand across all our support channels, as you would expect, increase in requests for support, etc. As I mentioned earlier, pre-lockdown phase, a mixture of new and previous experiences and increased experiences of anxiety around health and OCD, worry around causing harm to others, excessive hand washing was obviously being encouraged. Just a quick few statistics before we talk a little bit more detail about how you can help yourselves, etc., and some more specific advice. You can see the number of calls that we had in our first month went from the same period last year, we had 978. This year we had 2,640. And as you look across those different graphs, you can see the increase in emails, text messages, and live chat interactions. And that's just shown in a slightly different way across that sort of first period from beginning of March to the middle of April. You can see a huge increase in the number of contacts that we had. The percentages increases as showed there, the 170% increase in call volumes. That's actually gone up since this slide was created. Last week was one of our most busiest weeks. Actually, we thought it was starting to slow down, but it's at our busiest period. Our increase in calls has been over 430% higher than any other period in the last 3 years. And then we've got the lockdown phase, people misinterpreting some of the symptoms of being the coronavirus. So people experiencing maybe shortness of breath would mix that up and worry they have the virus. An increase in their anxiety, and also an increase in the number of crisis calls, which again we put down to the fact that the normal services that people would access were not available to them anymore during this lockdown phase. Oh, there we go. So we've obviously responded to that need as it's emerged. We've increased the helpline operating hours. We normally operated 40 hours a week. We've been operating 82 hours a week. And a lot of the extra support that we've brought in to help us manage that has been from our pool of Anxiety UK approved therapists. So if you did feel the need to call our helpline, it's open till 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, and at the weekend from 10 a.m. till 8 p.m. So lots of opportunity there to call our helpline if you did feel that you needed to talk to somebody about your anxiety. We've run a series of online webinars, a bit like you guys are doing with this evening, which you're able to watch again on our YouTube channel. We've created online anxiety management course, which is led by one of our therapists. We've also developed peer-led online anxiety support groups, again, a bit like you kind of meetings you guys are having. Because again, talking about isolation and loneliness, one of the ways people can help and manage their anxiety is to talk to others with similar situations, share experiences, but also like being part of that wider community of like-minded people can be really helpful to support each other. And we're now starting to plan for the post-lockdown adjustment phase. We launched, as I mentioned, I think earlier, the Compassion Focused Therapy Service at the beginning of last week. we are developing a post-lockdown adjustment phase service looking specifically at trauma support. We think there's going to be a lot of people that will come out of this having quite traumatized, possibly some people having PTSD, particularly frontline workers, NHS staff and care home staff who've been involved directly in the front line of delivering support for people living with and experiencing COVID-19, and in many cases not surviving it. So there'll be a lot of need for those kind of services. We've been providing data on service update to lots of organisations. And we will continue to listen and respond to our callers. One of the beauties of getting so many calls, such an increase in the number of calls to our helpline, is we can temperature check what people are worried about. So we've got a good finger on the pulse of what people are wanting and looking for. So I'm going to move off that. I'm going to stop sharing briefly just to see if there's any questions before I go on to the next phase. So the next phase, I'm going to start talking a little bit more specifically about what is anxiety and what it looks like, and then we'll talk about how we can manage it. And listening, the first thing I'm going to do is show you a quick video from one of our celebrity patrons, a guy called Nick Brewer, who's a young rapper, and his video is all about his own personal story. It's quite captivating and gives you a good insight into what it's like to live with anxiety. But before I do that, are there any queries, any questions at the moment? See any hands up?
I had one. What is compassion focused therapy in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, it's literally about being kind to yourself. It's been developed as a sort of, often described as a third wave CBT approach, cognitive behavioural therapy approach, but it's been designed specifically to tackle feelings of guilt and shame, which often the underlying patterns of guilt and shame are barriers to managing that anxiety through traditional therapy. So it's been developed by Professor Paul Gilbert, who runs the Compassionate Mind Foundation. I won't get too technical on you, but yeah, it's about dealing with those underlying patterns of guilt and shame, sometimes quite historic reasons that we have this anxiety and carry this anxiety around. Yeah. And it can be woven into support to other types of therapy as well.
How would someone go about thinking of getting it? What sites could they go on?
I mean, obviously you can go through ourselves. I'll talk through our system a little bit later on in the presentation, if that's all right, Anna. How you can access therapy with ourselves.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Any other queries, questions at this stage? Great. Okay, let me go back to the slides then. So I'm going to show you this video from Nick next, hopefully. This is always a challenge when I try and play. I tested this earlier and it worked fine, by the way.
Anxiety is something that I've felt for most of my life. Sometimes it stopped me from going outside. I've often struggled to sleep at night, and at points I ain't been eating right. It's a fear that's gripped me deep inside and not let go. I felt like giving up because I lost control, and when the panic attacks got involved, I didn't know what to do. As a teenager, I found it hard to talk about, so nobody knew. I just tried telling myself, I'm not mentally ill or nothing. I'm just struggling to deal with something. And that's what life is. When you hit crisis, you grit your teeth and keep grinding. It's no time for whining like, come on, Nick, you're supposed to be a man. Why are you crying? But honestly, that didn't work for me. My heart would beat so fast that it was hurting me. And the rush of blood to my head would almost turn me burgundy, filled with fear and uncertainty. Going through life, worrying like I'm gonna end up doing nothing with mine. Anxiety hit me like a sharp pain in my chest, and I said to myself that I can't take it again. I'd had enough. So I decided to talk to someone. I felt really embarrassed and didn't know what to say, because lies in my head said that I'm not the same. And exposing this weakness might cause me some pain, like, what if they laugh and tell me, jog on me. But they didn't. I spoke and they listened. And for the first time, I felt like I could escape from this prison in which my man had me living. That's not to say that anxiety just went away and never came again, but I was free from the burden. See, before I was feeling so certain that I was all alone. But now I'm no longer fooled. I know that people care and people can relate. And while it might not be the easiest thing to say, it's important that we start talking. Yeah, it might feel awkward at first, but the more we converse, I'm sure that the talking won't cause any hurt. So I hope you can open up. Look, I know it's tough. And understandably, it's something that you don't want to rush. That's fine. Take your time. But you ain't got to let it define you. Even though we will try to. See, my anxiety would never have let me stand at this stage and ramble away. But I can honestly say that talking with people is part of the reason that I can stand here today. So let's talk about it.
So that was Nick's story, and I always find that really powerful. I've watched that countless times, and I think the thing I always try to emphasise is talking about it is really important. He makes that point very strongly in that video, and I think it's a bit of a cliche sometimes, but a problem shared is a problem halved. I often mention Prince Harry. I remember Prince Harry talking about how he dealt with the grief of his losing his mum, and some of the anxieties and fears and worries that he had as a young man. And he said he only started to learn how to manage it, deal with it, and the mental health and the impact it was having when he started seeing a counsellor and talking to them about his feelings and what he was living with. So talking is very, very important, and sharing that is really important. So hopefully Nick's personal testimony of his own journey will help you feel, if you need to, that it's good to open up. Our own definition of anxiety is that feeling of unease or fear we get when faced with threatening or difficult situations. It is a normal and sometimes helpful emotion to experience, and it is helpful at times, because anxiety effectively is just fear or worry. And if we felt, think of an example where we feel anxious, where it's quite normal. It's like crossing a street, a busy main road. I mean, why wouldn't we feel anxious about that? It's quite normal. And that's also worth remembering. It's very normal to feel anxious. It's perfectly normal for us all to feel anxious about this whole pandemic, because none of us have been through anything like this before. So it's fine to feel anxious. But this is the critical bit here. If that anxiety becomes too strong, it's there all the time, then it becomes a long-term condition or disorder. And it starts to impact on your day-to-day living, your day-to-day functionality, as we call it. When it starts to stop you living life normally and it's making life unbearable for you, that's when you need to get that help and support. That's when it's gone beyond that helpful emotion that it can be, that sometimes can experience. And how does that manifest itself? Well, three different aspects. First of all, the physical symptoms, how you feel. And that can range from things like butterflies in the stomach, muscle tensions, hyperventilation, short, shallow breathing. You could have sweaty palms but feel quite cold. You have tingly sensation through your body. So lots of different physical symptoms that you will experience. And there's a whole list of them that you can look up and read on our website. Then you'll also have psychological symptoms. So what are you thinking? How you feel? What will your mind be saying? And last but not least, there's the behavioural aspect, the behavioural symptoms, what you do. And often that's can be often around avoidance. So because of your anxiety, you avoid doing something. You avoid, if you're agoraphobic and you feel panicky whenever you go to the shops, you avoid going to the shops. So perfectly natural response, you might think, but that's a behavioural symptom of your anxiety. But this is the really important bit. This is what we want to talk about, isn't it? What can help with your anxiety? What can we do to manage it or bring it under control? There's lots of things we can do, starting with self-help and self-care. And diet and exercise are hugely important in our mental well-being as much as they are in our physical well-being. Now, who hasn't put on weight during this pandemic? Because I know I have. I won't ask for a show of hands, I won't embarrass anyone, but we have done a lot of work over the last 2 or 3 years with nutritionists and leading academics in the field. So we produced last October a nutrition and anxiety guide, because one of our clinical advisors, a guy called Professor Ted Diner, he's the guy who identified there's a direct link between the gut microbiome and the brain. And so what we eat and what goes into our gut has a direct impact on how our brain responds. So eating the wrong kind of foods can really play havoc with your anxiety. If you are particularly prone to high levels of anxiety, for example, don't eat too many sugary drinks like Red Bull or Monster Energy, those kind of things, because they give you an adrenaline rush. Whereas we saw a minute ago, helpful emotion to experience, but when you have that anxiety, it is a bit like an adrenaline rush. So if you're already having that natural adrenaline rush through your anxiety, then you're then making it worse with that kind of high energy sugary drinks. A good food to eat, a good example is oily fish is good for you because it's got nutrients in it that help manage your well-being. So look at your diet, think about your exercise regime, because that can have a direct impact on your well-being. Investing in some self-care time, some me time. I mean, I said earlier about how a lot of people during the pandemic have said there's been some good and some bad. So the example of Packham and Springwatch, that me time that he's had out in the woods in his forest near where he lives, reconnecting with nature. Lots of people have been spending time in their gardens, and one of my neighbours has done loads of work in his garden. We've done a fair bit in our own over these last couple of months. So those kind of time for you to do those little things, and that's why in this couple of months, people who have spent time maybe doing exercise that they hadn't done before, lots of people doing yoga classes and those kind of things, it's really good for you. So try and find something that you enjoy. Baking is another one. Baking has been really popular during this last couple of months, and it's a good way to help manage your anxiety. Writing a journal, keeping a diary is another good way. It's something that not many of us do these days, and we tend not to write long letters to each other, do we? We just send emails or WhatsApp or messages on Facebook. But if you were engaged in therapy, quite often a therapist would encourage you to keep a diary, write a journal, make a note of when you're feeling good, when you're feeling bad, what made you feel bad, what made you feel down, what lifted you. It can help identify some patterns of your behaviour and thought process. Lots of self-help books available these days. A lot of them are, very many of them are CBT based, cognitive behavioural therapy based. So based on an evidence base. So overcoming health anxiety, overcoming low self-esteem, a couple of examples of the Overcoming series of books that are available through our website or through Amazon, obviously. Obviously, if you buy through Amazon, fine. If you buy through Anxiety UK, you're helping support a charity. But self-help books can be really helpful, really good books out there that you might want to consider. I mentioned peer support and self-help groups earlier. We're running a series of those online at the moment through Zoom meetings, because obviously meeting, other than virtual meetings, it's impossible at the moment. Although online peer support has been around for a number of years anyway, so it's not new. It's always been quite popular, and it's something that I mentioned our research fund earlier. We actually did a piece of research that we commissioned about 3 or 4 years ago now into the benefits of online peer support, and there's lots of evidence that show it works. Obviously, talking therapy helps with anxiety, and just to prove I've overlooked updating this slide, we should also add compassion focused therapy to that list now. But talking therapy is another form of help, and for some people, if they can't get it under control through the self-help techniques, they find a course of talking therapy, and where a therapist will help develop some methods and some coping strategies for them is useful. Medication is another form of help. Obviously, your GP or a psychiatrist psychologist can prescribe medication for you. And again, some people find medication works better than therapy. Some people find it's a combination of both. it's one of the real challenges with anxiety is there's no quick fix, and B, there's no right or wrong. Each one of us is different, and each one of us will respond differently to different treatment pathways. And last but not least, mindfulness is a great way of trying to manage anxiety. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but mindfulness is a really, really good tool. Whatever you, and it's one of the reasons I mentioned nature a couple of times in the chat this evening. And just sitting listening to the bird songs outside is very mindful. It's about bringing your awareness to what you're directly experiencing via your senses. So your state of mind is focused in. It's that being present, right, in where you are, what you're doing, what's going on around you. It's just focusing on that here and now, and not being overwhelmed by anything else that's distracting us or being distracted or overreacting to it. Now, one of the techniques we've been using, and another one that you might find really useful, is the Apple technique. It's come from a website called getselfhelp.co.uk, and it's a form. It comes in the form of a therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. It's a derivative of CBT, but the Apple technique is one that we've been encouraging people to use, particularly during this pandemic. It's something that's easy to remember, and it's good for helping you manage that anxiety in these difficult times, and draws a little bit, as you'll see at the end, on a bit of mindfulness. So just run through this. So the A for Apple is acknowledge. So we're saying is notice and acknowledge the uncertainty as it comes to mind. So recognize it for what it is. So what's causing that anxiety, that uncertainty? Because a lot of what we were going through at the beginning of this pandemic was uncertainty of what's going to happen. Now, as we're coming out of it, we're back into that uncertainty of what's going to happen when I go back to work, what's going to happen when I get on the bus, what's going to happen, when I go down the shops now. Is it going to get? So notice it, acknowledge it as it comes to mind, but then pause. Don't react as you normally do. In fact, if you can, try not to react quite as it comes to mind. Just try and pause and breathe. So as you're feeling the anxiety rising, as you're feeling that panicky feeling maybe coming out to start to take over you, just try and pause and breathe, and just try and step back, pull back. Just tell yourself, remind yourself, this is the worry that's talking. It's not, it's not for real. A lot of often you'll hear people talking about anxiety. It's about that what if. You're worrying about something. It's that fear. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if the other happens? But it's just the worry talking. We often talk and refer to it as a bully. It's a little bully sat on your shoulder. What we need to do is try and get you to control the bully and the bully not control you. So that you have that apparent need for certainty, and it's not helpful, it's not necessary. It's only a thought or a feeling, and don't believe everything that you think. Thoughts, so you say here, they're not statements or facts, they are just thoughts. So acknowledge, pause, pull back. Let go. Try and let go of that thought or feeling there. It will pass. You don't have to respond to it right there and then. Try and imagine it floating away in a bubble or a cloud. I mentioned earlier the series of webinars that we've been having that you can watch again on our YouTube channel. One of our therapists did one of those on tolerated uncertainty. I remember her talking about letting go of those thoughts and feelings. And she described it as, imagine you're at the bus stop and the double-decker bus comes along. It's not yours, but you want to get rid of those thoughts and feelings. And you just place them on the top deck of that bus and watch the bus drive off with them. Imagine those thoughts and feelings that are worrying you just being driven away. And then last but not least, the E of Apple, explore. This is about, again, it's a touching on mindfulness. It's exploring the present moment. Because right now in this moment, all is fine, all is well. You're worried about something that might happen in the future. It might happen if you cross the road. It might happen if you go to the shops or go back to work. So you explore that present moment. Notice your breathing and the sensations of your breathing. Try and slow yourself down and just focus your mind on your own breathing. Try and notice the ground around and beneath you. And then look around at what you can see, what you can hear, and what you can touch and what you can smell right here, right now. Then maybe shift your focus and attention to something else on what you need to do and what you were doing before you noticed the worry. Or do something else mindfully with your full attention. So that's touching a little bit on mindfulness. So the Apple technique is there. So acknowledge, pause, pull back, let go, explore. It's a good way of trying to manage that anxiety as it suddenly feel it rising. I'm going to stop there briefly before we move on to another short video and see if there's any other questions or queries at that stage. All looks good. Great, I'll crack on. So this next video, again, it's a short video. It's going to repeat some of the things I've mentioned, but it's very much a summary of tips and advice about things you can think about doing to help you manage your anxiety. A company in Bristol designed this for us last year. They said, they were doing something at work one day, and they decided to put together a little video around anxiety, practical tips for dealing with it. We would like to use it. It's fantastic what they did for us. So let's run this.
Anxiety is the body's natural response to danger. When our cave-dwelling selves got into trouble, our primitive brains would trigger an anxiety response to help us deal with a life-threatening situation. This is known as the fight, flight, or freeze response. Once we dealt with the danger, the anxious feeling would subside and we'd feel normal again. The problem is, our brains haven't changed an awful lot since then, and they can still perceive everyday stresses as life-threatening. When the responses aren't dealt with properly, they can build up over time and cause anxiety disorders. Here are 9 practical tips to help you start living with anxiety. Learn. The more you know about anxiety, the better. There are a ton of books, podcasts, and videos out there to get you started. Sleep. Establishing a good sleep routine and getting the right amount of sleep will help reduce anxiety. Dreaming helps the brain declutter itself of those unresolved anxiety responses. Exercise. Getting plenty of exercise reduces the amount of stress hormones in your body, which build up when your body goes into fight or flight mode. Don't smoke. People often smoke to calm their nerves, but cigarettes actually contain substances that can trigger anxiety and trick your body into fight or flight mode. Diet. Too much sugar can cause anxiety, as can coffee, tea, and alcohol. Eating a healthy, balanced diet helps reduce anxiety. Positive thinking. When you're having negative thoughts, challenge them. Repeat positive thoughts instead. Anxiety can't take hold when you're in a positive frame of mind. Visualize success. The primitive brain doesn't know the difference between imaginary threats and real ones. So instead of constantly worrying about failure, treat stressful scenarios as a challenge. Visualize yourself succeeding, and you might be pleasantly surprised. Relax. Try some guided meditation, mindfulness in household tasks, or just spend some time doing something you really enjoy. Give your brain a break from its cycle of negative thinking, even if it's just for a short time. Therapy. Seeking help from a professional therapist can help you form a game plan in dealing with anxiety, as well as offering a different perspective and alternative methods of treatment. Anxiety can often feel like an unwinnable fight, so it helps to have someone in your corner.
Okay, that was skipped on too quickly then. I've gone the wrong way. Bear with me. Messed that up, haven't I? Yeah. So that was a short video, as I say, which covered, summarised some quick, easy tips that you can consider. I mentioned mindfulness. This is Headspace is an app that we recommend, and if you become a member of Anxiety UK, you get a year's subscription to Headspace free with that membership. It's probably the market leader in mindfulness meditation apps, and it is a really good one. There are lots of others out there, so have a look around. You don't have to commit to this one. They do I think it's a 14-day free trial version, and also at the moment they're running a series of mindfulness webinars on YouTube with the Metro. So again, look up Headspace on YouTube if you want to try doing some mindfulness practices. There's some there that you can do totally free of charge and see how you find it and how you get on with it. And if you find that mindfulness really does help you, there's lots of other websites and people out there promoting mindfulness and giving you access to free short 5-10 minute mindfulness meditation exercises and tools. Breathworks is an organisation we do a lot of work with. They've got some free resources at the moment. Obviously, during the pandemic, they made them available free of charge. So that professional support, obviously, the GP is a good place to start. A lot of this stuff is available on the NHS, and medication obviously needs to be prescribed by your GP or as I say earlier, oncologist. If you wanted to access private counselling or CBT therapy, clinical therapy, or CFT at our discounted rates or online, all of our therapy is still being delivered by telephone or online at the moment. We're obviously not doing face-to-face therapy for the time being, but we are doing online and phone therapy, and we've had twice the number of therapy referrals this month that we would get in a normal month. So it's hugely busy, but we're able to satisfy that demand. To access that, you do need to be a member, and you can call our helpline. As I said earlier, we're open till 10 at night. We could talk you through the membership benefits, or just go onto the website and find out you can sign up online. Once you become a member, you can then fill in an application of therapy referral form, and we will then allocate you to a therapist. You would start therapy once all the forms have been processed and you've made your initial payment for your first couple of sessions of therapy. You would then be allocated to a therapist. Once you're allocated to a therapist, they will contact you and arrange. They should be arranging your first appointment within 1 week. So it's very quick, a lot quicker than a lot of other people will give it to you. So that's us. That's our contact details and what we can do. I'm going to stop sharing that because I think Luke's got a copy of the slides anyway, which he can circulate, maybe as a PDF, Luke, or maybe with a copy of the video thing anyway. I've also got a few other links I can send you, Luke, for some other mindfulness sites that you might want to share with people.
That would be great, please. Yeah,
I'll dig those out. But that's really it. I mean, it is a difficult time. We're all struggling to deal with things that we've never had to deal with before. We're all feeling anxious about things we've probably never felt anxious about before. The unfamiliarity of it, the isolation, the loneliness, the missing family and friends. A very, very good close friend of mine lost his mum a couple of weeks ago, and then on the eve of him going down to her, he was able to go to her funeral. His dad was taken to hospital, so wasn't able to attend his own wife's funeral. So there's some really sad stories that we've heard, or I'm sure we've all heard, and it's really difficult when we can't get to see our loved ones and whatever, and that raises our anxiety and our worries and our fears and our concerns. It doesn't help our mental well-being. So try and find some techniques, some methods that help you manage that. Mindfulness or some mindfulness activities, as I say, sewing, baking, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. I know some people doing a lot more baking than they would have ever done in their lives, and running out of flour. I can see somebody recognises that one. Yeah, if you can get the flour. If you can't get the flour, get some get some needle and thread and start making face masks for people, or whatever it is that you can do to keep yourself occupied and engaged and thoughtful and in that moment. So I hope that's given you some insight into. It's a brief, it's a flavour of what you could do to help manage it, some tips and techniques that hopefully you'll find useful, and some signposting to where else you can get more in-depth support if you feel you need it. Happy to. Did I answer your question earlier, Anna?
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Anything? Do we want to just open it up for a chat, Luke?
Yeah, that's fine. If anyone does have any questions or just thoughts, do please share
Again, you
that.
might have your own experiences. You might want to share some of your. Oh, I tried something that worked really well for me. Then.
Yeah, I know. I've found exercise helping a lot recently. I've found that a big relief, just to, if anything else, just to get that feeling of routine, and it gives that almost a release, even if it isn't anything particularly strenuous, even just a brisk walk. I find really, really helps.
I have to apologise for being late. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry.
Oh, no problem. That's fine, Kate. We're glad you could join. Yeah.
I just feel like I'm going more mad every week. Because I'm shielding, so I can't leave my flat or anything. So it's just
know you're mad.
starting to get.
Yeah, that's difficult. Are you on your own there as well, Anna?
Yeah. I speak to my family like every day, but yeah, I'm on my own, so it's the thoughts get to me quite a lot. So I'm having quite a lot of panic attacks and stuff.
Okay. Well, there is a panic attack booklet that you can download from our website free of charge.
Okay.
So if you go to our website and go to the shop, and there's a section on that, there's like a menu down the left-hand side. It will say free resources.
Okay.
And there's some booklets there. One is about panic attacks and panic little guide there. So that little Apple technique, maybe try that. That's good. There's other distraction techniques in there that could help you, or breathing exercises. There's a breathing exercise is just breathing in for 4 or 5 seconds, holding it for a couple of seconds, then breathing out for about 7 or 8 seconds. So as you breathe out longer, emphasize the out breath being longer than the in breath, and do that for about half a dozen times, and that should help calm your nervous system down a little bit. That breathing exercise tends to bring down that panicky feeling. The panic is like all it is a sudden surge of anxiety, a sudden rush of anxiety. It's like when the fuse blows on the electric, it's because there's a sudden sharp spike of electric, it blows a fuse. Same sudden sharp spike of anxiety creates the panic attack. But it is temporary, and it'll last about, on average, about 5 to 20 minutes. If a full-blown panic attack can be really disabling. If anyone's never experienced it, I mean, people will often take them for heart attacks. So it is a scary, horrible, debilitating experience. There's nothing to, but if you can, download that booklet, Anna, and that'll help you with some tools.
Yeah, because my therapist says I emotionally bully myself as well. So that's constantly on my mind as well.
Yeah. It is difficult though. I mean, I'm shielding technically as well. I've been a couple of times. I've jumped in the car and taken the wife to the shops, and she goes and does all the shopping, but I just sit in the car. But just that driving 10 minutes away from the house, even though I'm not getting out of the car, is just a break from being constantly in the same space. But it's not easy, and especially if you're in a flat and if you've got a garden, maybe I guess not.
No, I've got the balcony, so I sit out there quite a lot.
Yeah, and let's be grateful for the good things, the positive things, isn't it? It's like, imagine if it had been pouring rain for the last 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah. I know during all of this, I don't think I've spoke to people on the phone more in the last 6 weeks or so compared to before. Because people have the time No, so I feel like there's friends who I've known for 25 years that I feel like I've known them more from the last 2 weeks than all that time before. So yeah, it is nice to think of some of the positives as well. I think, yeah.
Watch Spring Watch as well, 8 o'clock BBC.
Oh yeah, I always watch BBC One anyway.
Yeah. It was really good that night. And yeah. And there's not much else on the telly at the moment anyway, is there?
Anything's better than football anyway, now.
Yeah. Stay away from the news. Don't watch the news.
Well, we always gotta have our COVID-19, fix sort of thing, but apart from that, no.
Oh,
They haven't said anything about the shielding stuff, and that's what I don't get.
Yeah. It was 12 weeks though, wasn't it?
oh, they've
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're extending it though.
I don't
don't
know.
know.
That's what I've heard, that they're supposed to be extending it for certain people.
I hope
I
not.
calculated that I should finish about the 22nd of June, I think, or the 29th of June. I can't remember. So,
I think mine says the 30th, but
yeah.
Well, I can't shield really because I'm going through daily radiotherapy at the minute, so I have to just take the precautions I can.
I'm not sure what we're supposed to do after the shielding though, because they
yeah, that's what I don't get.
They reckon 95% of the population hasn't had it. So yeah.
It's something where just to reassure you, if it helps, it's something that we're planning on developing information and communications on for hopefully mid to late June, because that's roughly the time that most people will be looking to transition out of shielding, because it will be, as we've discussed this evening, it's going to be such a shock for people who have been shielding or socially distancing, self-isolating, for everyone to then sort of to go back to normality in quotation marks. So it is something we're looking at to watch this space. But if there is anything in particular, if you have any specific questions or anything, do let us know, because we'll keep that in mind, because if one person's thinking it, it's more than likely that most people are thinking it, or lots of people are, and so it would help us to then get the information out and things like that.
Just like, Luke, just probably things like what impact having COVID could have on having TSC, things like that, maybe.
Yeah.
Because that's not we don't know a lot about that side, do we? The impact of it.
Yeah. Well, we can have a look at that. See what's there.
I think I'm very surprised if there isn't another communication for those of us that are shielding in the next 2 or 3 weeks. As we get closer towards that 12-week point, they'll undoubtedly be somebody be planning to give us an update on whether it's extended or what we can do next, along with what's happening with what everyone else can do next. I know from a work perspective, we're not planning on going back in the office just yet, because again, they're not saying that you have to. They're saying if you can still work from home, continue to do so. We've managed to work from home very successfully for since the 17th of March, the whole of our team.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to go back until we have to. But even then, we're planning for it now. But because I'm shielding, we're looking at, we've managed to work quite successfully for 9 weeks from home. Why can't we continue to successfully work from home ad infinitum? So, if you've got a fear or worry, if you do have to go back to work, talk to your employer. If you've been working from home, say, look, well, I've managed to work from home for the last 2 months. Why can't I work from home maybe and just start to come back in gradually for part-time for a couple of days, or negotiate that? Because one of the things that a therapist will work with you on if you've got high levels of anxiety around a certain situation is gradual exposure. So gradually exposing you going back to work is going to help manage that anxiety surrounding it. If you've been shielding, you're not particularly worried about your health, about going back into normal routine.
Sorry, go on, Kate.
I was just going to say, I must admit, I've been struggling. I have functional neurological disorder as well as adrenal failure, and I found through this the symptoms that I have when my adrenal levels are really low. I get very jumpy. I get a certain amount of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I mean, we were putting the tellies up there on the wall, and we were pushing, my partner was pushing the wires up out the way, and must have knocked the aerial wire, because it suddenly was like snow on the telly and really loud thing. And I ran away like a scared child and hid in the kitchen. And I only realised I'd done it after I'd done it. So
Yeah.
I'm like, this is crazy. This is not me. But you know, it's so I must admit I'm struggling, because when I get anxious, my functional neurological symptoms come up, and I get very dizzy, and then I have non-epileptic seizures. And it's just horrible at the moment. Really unpleasant.
Have you talked to GP about that, Katie?
I am under under someone from the hospital who is contacting me, but it's I can't deal with the reasons why it's happening, because it's too stressful to do over what's it called, like a attend anywhere call, and it's only like 1 hour, and that I talk to this person, and I have things that I have to do for homework, but can't really do them, because by the time I get to the end of the day and need to write down, I've forgotten what I've done, because I have memory issues, and it's just it looks like we're going to have to move house, and it's just everything is getting a little bit on top of me at the moment. I find it very stressful.
What I would say is just utilise that support as much as you can that you've got, and get them to make sure that's there for you, and try and find something to maybe that mindfulness approach. Maybe that some of that might help you to have a look into that.
I haven't been baking, but I've been crocheting.
Brilliant.
Oh, very nice.
Like 3 days in. Yeah.
And the good thing about crocheting is you're not making yourself lots of temptations to eat and put more weight on.
Oh, I've been cooking as well.
I mean, we gone through a whole book of Stephen King, The Institute.
We got a question on the chat, Dave, for you. Someone who just said that my daughter is almost 12 years old and suffers from anxiety, panic attacks, and things like that, and she's shielding. And does Anxiety UK have any resources or advice that's aimed for children or teenagers? Yeah,
we do. We've got a service specifically called Helping Your Child service. I don't know if I think Lisa's still on the chat, isn't she? Let me see if I can find a link to it for you, Lisa, which I'll pop in here. But yeah, we've got a service called Helping Your Child, which is it's a parent-led, parent-guided CBT support, basically, and it's all based around a book called Helping Your Child's Fears and Worries, written by Professor Kathy Cresswell, and it's evidence-based. It's based on CBT approach. But what you can do one or two things, Lisa. You can buy the book and read it for yourself, and provide that support yourself for your daughter, based on the content of the book. So effectively, you're her therapist, and the book will guide you through what to do with her. Or, if you became a member, you could access a support program for that. So instead of just delivering the self-help book to your daughter on your own, you'll have half a dozen sessions with one of our therapists who will guide you through that process. So let me see if I can find that for you. Put the link in there.
Thank you, that's great.
Oh, you're welcome, Lisa. Let me see if I can find it to put it into the link in there for you, Walsmith. Any other queries, or while I'm looking for this for Lisa? No.
Can I suggest to Lisa that she investigates EFT, which is the emotional freedom technique, which is tapping on various points of your body to calm down the cortisol. It just calms your whole body, and she might be able to use that for herself. That's a great technique.
I think I've seen you, I think, Jane, doing that on Facebook, I think, and I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, I suppose it links in with what Dave's been talking about in terms of finding ways to recognise it when it's happening, for her to recognise it when she's getting into this sort of state. And then I'm really trying to encourage her to find ways of managing it herself, as you say. Because as she's getting older, obviously, and you know, things are changing for her, and you know, COVID has come at such a rubbish time because you know, things are changing. She's just moved schools. You know, there's a lot of change, and of course, this is huge. And we are having you know, we are obviously having real phases of anxiety and upset and emotional, and yeah, and I'm trying to encourage her, as you, to recognise it herself. And then self-care, and you know, what is it that helps you, Beth, feel happier? She draws lots and lots and lots, so you know, that's a great thing. I'm pleased that she's got that. But yeah, I have seen you, Jane, doing that, and I wondered if we perhaps need to go down that route. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
If you I can send it to you as well, Lisa. I'll make a note. But in a previous session that we did, it was part of the Outlook virtual session. We had an EFT practitioner going through, and Jane is the expert on EFT as well. So yeah, she will be able to offer you some good resources on EFT.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
And I've popped that link in the chat there, Lisa. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
I don't know if it'd be any interest or anything, but I do a lot of drawing too. So if your daughter, I don't know, wants to kind of have a chat about drawing, or anything, I'm always there. And there's a load of, well, I started doing a load of drawing videos on my Facebook page. So they're there if that might be any interest to her as well.
Okay, great. Was there any more questions before we finish up for Dave? No. Well, in that case, yeah, have a good evening, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Luke.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.